Our students, our kids, they have been very much busy with digital gadgets, applications, softwares, and after AI technology, everything is transformed into the new world. Allah Almighty is talking to Muslims. Allah says, "O you who believed, protect yourselves and your families from the fire whose fuel is the people and stones." So it means it is an obligatory act enjoined upon us by Almighty Allah and His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to protect your families.
The impact of technology on the modern family. It sounds a little bit futuristic, but I think when we look at historical evolution of societies, we find societies going through different influences. I think it is perhaps no longer appropriate to talk about the family. I think we need to find what do we mean by the family. And if today we are talking about the modern family, yes, the modern family is different from other families that existed throughout history.
Dr. Ibrahim Alladin is a professor and writer, and he was educated in England, Canada, and Australia. A well-known sociologist, and he has authored about 20 books in a variety of fields, including education, economic development, and cultural diversity. Recently, he wrote the biography of Maulana Abdul-Alim Siddiqui, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, which was entitled as Maulana Abdul-Alim Siddiqui, His Life, Thoughts, and Message. And before a few months, we celebrated the book launch ceremony of the same book here at the Imam Zainul Abidin Hall of City of Knowledge Islamic Research Institute. So we have the privilege today to listen to Dr. Sahib's talk again, and his today's topic is very much important for us because we have immense influence of technology on our societies. So when he selected the subject for himself, the impact of technology on the modern families, people ask me, why has he used the word modern family? So I request Honorable Dr. Sahib that before he embarked into the subject, he may please define what is the difference between family and what is the modern family. So I humbly request Professor Dr. Ibrahim Alladin to come forward, take the rostrum, and speak on the subject.
Dr. Umair, I thank you very much for this kind introduction, and I equally thank you for your kind invitation to the City of Knowledge for a second time. I was here last year, and as Dr. Sahab just mentioned, I gave a lecture last night, and this is the second lecture in a series that I'm addressing to the folks here. Indeed, the impact of technology on the modern family. It sounds a little bit futuristic, but I think when we look at historical evolution of societies, we find societies going through different influences, and I think it is perhaps no longer appropriate to talk about the family, because, like you quite rightly said, I think we need to define what do we mean by the family. And if today we are talking about the modern family, yes, the modern family is different from other families that existed throughout history. So I'll give you a snapshot, a historical snapshot of different trends, different evolution in our human history, and how societies have evolved, and along with the evolution of societies, how people, how families have survived and changed over a period of time. The family today is not the same as it was 500 years ago. So we've got to understand how family is not a homogeneous unit. Families are now dynamic, they're evolving, they're changing, and that's the first point to bear in mind when we're talking about the modern family. To understand what do we mean by the modern family, what I'm going to do this evening as part of my presentation is to take you through a historical journey. And as we go through this historical journey, then it will become evident that there has been changes in our society, and with changes in our society, there have been all kinds of other changes, industrial changes, the impact of certain forces that made us what we are today, or brought us what we are today. So there are various trends and influences. And to take you through this historical journey, I have divided the presentation into 4 parts. And I'm going to talk about 4 major trends, historical trends that have impacted on our life, trends that have impacted on individuals, on societies, on countries, on human behavior. And along with those changes, we have also developed lifestyle changes. So what it used to be 500 years ago is no longer in use today. So with these 4 influences, 4 trends, it will perhaps become a little bit easier to understand the trends. And I guess let me begin with the first major historical event that impacted on societies, and historians have described this as the first industrial revolution. First industrial revolution that took place between 1780 and about 1850. The famous British historian Arnold Toynbee coined the term Industrial Revolution in 1760, and with this evolution that started in Britain, how structures, how societies have influenced us, the changes significant with the Industrial Revolution. So I guess the first question we need to ask, what happened during the first Industrial Revolution? And yes, it was a major turnaround in history, the first major significant change that transformed traditional economies. And if we took Britain as an example, where the movement started, we find how the agrarian society that existed prior to the Industrial Revolution that started in 1780, significant changes in the mode of production, significant changes in the life of the working people, and more importantly, the economic development that started. So during that period, there was a lot of expansion, and we observed a lot of economic expansion during that period of time. That was, some historians call it, the heyday of colonization, where Britain went all across the world looking for products, looking for raw materials to finance the Industrial Revolution that was happening in England and in Europe. And with that influence, that first Industrial Revolution, we have the changes within the structure of the family. So traditionally, during the Industrial Revolution, that period, the family, and here I'm talking about Europe, I'm not talking about Asian societies, we'll come back to that a little bit later. So right now I'm specifically talking about what happened during the Industrial Revolution in Europe, particularly in Britain. So structure of the family changes with the economic development and the movement of people. There was shift from peasantry, shift from agricultural to more industrial. So you've got the growth of towns and cities, and naturally with the process of urbanization you've got movement of people. Now in an agricultural society you have space, open space. We've got families, larger families because of space, and again depending on the mode of production. But when you move to the city, the influences, there are changes in the structure of the family. So here we find the beginning, the changes of the traditional form of family with the economic expansion that occurred. The second industrial revolution occurred, and that brought further changes. So what happened during the second industrial revolution? And here we're looking at the evolution of industry and technology. We've got raw materials such as iron and steel being used to drive industries. So with the growth of industrial towns in Great Britain, now we're talking about industries, we're talking about factories, we're talking about steel factories, we're talking about tools, we're talking about electrification, we're talking about the development of power to drive industry, we're talking about the modernization of the coal mining sector. Coal being used to drive factories, and if you read novels by, for example, Charles Dickens, he explains the changes in British society, particularly the working people. And here I'm going to give you a very interesting reference for those scholars who are interested to look at changes within the British workers. A very interesting book by E.P. Thompson. E.P. Thompson was a social historian, and he traced the origin of the British working class. And the name of the book is The Making of the English Working Class. And in this book, historian E.P. Thompson takes us through the evolution of the significant changes within British industry and how it gave rise to the working class, and with that changes and shifts within the family structure. Okay, so that's sort of we're talking about very briefly about the second revolution. And don't forget, during the second revolution, we also got the introduction of construction of railways. And that's again very important to understand evolution of societies, how cities get connected, the mode of transportation and the mode of communication, very important in terms of looking at the impact of human behavior. And that also brings changes to lifestyle. So you've got the introduction of railways, both in various parts of Europe. Then we've got the introduction of power, the electrification of industries, and with that we've got the growth of industries. So we've got major cities like Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham in Britain. So we've got the growth of these industries, and now Britain has become during the second revolution, Great Britain has become the powerhouse of Europe, driving all those industries, raw materials coming from various parts of the world, including the subcontinent. India was colonized by Great Britain, and the raw materials from India were sent to drive the Industrial Revolution in the UK. During the second revolution, we've got the introduction of machine, and that's significant, how machine changes the mode of production. Now, in the past, prior to the first Industrial Revolution, tools were very rudimentary, very rough, very little use of machinery. With the introduction of tools, with the introduction of iron and steel, with the introduction of light machinery in agriculture, in industries, now we have the economic transformation of the agrarian agricultural societies. Okay? So as we are changing, we have families also changing significantly. The question that was asked earlier, but how come we're talking about the modern family, and is the modern family different? We haven't reached the modern stage yet. Now, I'm going to pause here for a sec just to try to understand, try to capture how did the traditional family look like. And I think if we look at any peasant society, any agricultural society, families tended to be large. And the traditional family very often described as the extended family. Extended family meaning we've got first and second generation, probably even in some cases a third generation, all sharing the same dwelling. So we've got families with grandparents, grandchildren staying together, and they tended to be large. And that's why in sociology we call them, we describe this type of family as the extended family. Extended meaning the family comprising of more than one generation that includes grandparents, grandchildren living together. And extended families tend to be large. So the extended family existed because there was a lot of space. People worked on farms, worked in agriculture, and it was also economic necessity for families to work together because labor was required, and the whole family would work together as one unit. And such families still exist in various parts of the world. So if you go to, for example, rural Pakistan, in some parts of Pakistan, you still may see extended families, large families living together and working the fields, working the plantation, whether it's agriculture. Collectively, it's in the interest of the family to stay together, and also economically, it is more productive. Okay, so that's a definition of the extended family. And we also call that the traditional family because they lived in traditional communities. French sociologist by the name of Émile Durkheim, he characterized society comprising of two components. The first component, he called it organic solidarity. And the second component is mechanical solidarity. So these are dichotomies to describe societies changing from traditional to a more modern society. And he described the kind of changes that occur as societies evolve with industrialization, with economic development, with all kinds of forces. So they do impact on the family. So after the second revolution, we enter the third revolution. And here we're looking at societies sort of converging. There's a lot of economic activities, particularly after the First World War in the 1920s onwards. So we have a lot of changes in the structures of society, a lot of movement, a lot of political development, political changes, a lot of evolution in terms of colonization, countries being colonized, new borders. If you look at whether it's in continent of Africa, Asia, Central America, Spanish, Portuguese, British, French, there's colonization all over the world, and it is impacting on these societies. So imagine when countries are colonized, There's an immediate impact on the society because one of the attributes of colonization is to change the structure of the society, and the colonial structure is imposed on the society.